Well, if you read my teaser in the Thursday email or watched the video, you already know where we're going. At the heart of generosity, in fact, in the exact middle of the word itself, sits eros, the Greek word we associate with sexual, erotic love. And yes, I'm going to claim that eros is at the heart of healthy, human, just generosity. But I can assure any of you starting to squirm in your seats that no, despite the past week's unseasonably warm weather, it's not going to get particularly steamy in here during my message today. Still, my thoughts on eros and its relationship to generosity didn't fall from the sky. They unfolded in my life. And since most of you don't know much about me yet, we'll get to the heart of generosity, but we'll get there by way of the classroom and the bedroom. It's like I'm missing a page here. That's so strange. Okay, so we're going to just go forward. I learned about agape early in life. It was the highest love. It was perfect love. It was self-giving love. It was sacrificial love. And it was love beyond human reach. It was love that became the measure of every human love. And that human love was found wanting. It was almost as though agape got center stage for the precise purpose of showing us up. Don't get me wrong, philia, literally brotherly love, but more broadly love between friends, had its own legitimate nobility, and eros, at least in its cleaned up expression of rather sexless romantic love, had its place, although more casually, eros was recognized as love gone wild, lust, insatiable desire, self-centered longing. Best give eros a wide berth. And parents at least got a temporary gift pass to agape in their better moments on account of taking care of helpless little ones. But agape, as I later learned, excellent student that I was, agape was perfect love. Did I say unconditional, self-giving, sacrificial, holy love? Beyond the reach of all but saints. So, of course, excellent student that I was, I took a big gulp and said, "Hold my beer." Sadly, I think it's fair to say that the wreckage of my first two marriages, both of which ended in divorce, accompanied by differing degrees of harm to those involved, is indebted in no small part to my persistent and persistently unsuccessful emulation of agape. I only began to see that years later when eros stole my heart. Well, actually, Margaret stole my heart. But eros came along for the ride, thank God for that. But we're not quite done in the classroom yet, because after 2 decades as an excellent student with 2 master's degrees completed, I became a professor of religion. What happens next is a little like origami artwork. A whole bunch of creases get made, and all of a sudden those individual folds rather unexpectedly allow a flat sheet of paper to become a 3-dimensional something entirely new. So these are the creases. I had a 5th grade Sunday school teacher who, in essence, taught me to pray. Not long after, he went off to seminary, only to be kicked out very shortly for being gay. Years later, after a couple decades of drowning his sorrow at a ruptured vocation in food and drink, he suffered a massive stroke. I spent many hours over the last months of his life at his bedside until he died at age 46. Later, in seminary, I counted at least half a dozen gay or lesbian classmates among my close friends. They were pursuing ministry in a Lutheran church that at the time demanded a sort of self-sacrificial secrecy of them in exchange for permitting them to declare good news to virtually everyone except themselves. A decade later, early in my grad studies at Notre Dame, the National ELCA Lutheran Church decided to talk about sexuality. Having just used a PhD seminar in Christian ethics to clarify my views and sharpen my voice, I found myself nervous but driven to speak up in my own congregation on behalf of those seminary friendships. And a couple years later, still at Notre Dame, I found myself weeping late at night over a poem written by an anonymous gay senior and published in a campus magazine. I wrote a response to his poem that lit my own soul on fire. Published a week later in the same magazine, it became the first of a series of pieces I wrote as an ally while at Notre Dame. So those are all, or at least most, of the creases that were in place when I showed up at Luther College fresh out of Notre Dame in the fall of 1998. Now, the all of a sudden folding. That October, the Campus Pride Group's National Coming Out Day celebration sparked some ugly backlash on campus. In my classes, I addressed it directly in a way that made clear I was an ally. One thing led to another, and before I'd even been on campus for 2 months, I found myself speaking at a campus-wide convocation. After that, quite a few LGBTQ students started emailing me, and I freely shared the handful of essays I'd written at Notre Dame affirming LGBTQ persons from a theological perspective. The following spring, one of my colleagues in religion taught a course on religion, sex, and power. To his surprise, and mine too, several of his gay and lesbian students wrote final papers citing my unpublished essays in their references. Years before Facebook came along, my words had gone viral, and I didn't even know it. Until that colleague approached me and suggested that I ask our department chair about teaching a course focused on homosexuality and Christian theology, since there were clearly students hungry to learn. I asked the chair, and he said yes. So all of a sudden, or so it seemed, as summer 1999 began, I was educating myself to teach a course titled LGBT Voices in Theology the following spring. We'd be reading Christian theology written by gay and lesbian theologians to hear how their theology was shaped by their sexuality. And I was about to meet Eros on her own terms, center stage, with agape nowhere in sight. That same summer, I was also about to meet Margaret. Well, that's a whole other story in itself. We'd actually dated quite seriously 20 years earlier in college, then went our separate ways, married different people, became parents, divorced, and here we were reconnecting at 39, happily surprised when romance began to blossom again, despite the 150 miles between us. Old enough to have known real heartbreak and to recognize the gift of new love on the cusp of 40, and young enough to still feel like mischievous teenagers as that new love unfolded. And this is the crucial thing. As we were navigating the wonder of our intimacy, I was also reading gay and lesbian theology, and Margaret and I were talking about it together. Well, we did more than just talk, but I promised you a PG-rated message. Let's just say we talked and talked and talked some more. As I said earlier, Margaret stole my heart, and Eros came along for the ride. So let me tell you about that. Many of us, my age or older, if we grew up Christian and straight, grew up learning that Eros was not proper love. Eros was about desire, lust, pleasure, and satisfaction, which we unfortunately and inaccurately paired exclusively with sexual desire, lust, pleasure, and satisfaction, and then framed it as selfish sexual desire, lust, pleasure, and satisfaction. Still, being straight comes with privileges. So because our straight sexuality was affirmed by church and society, if a little eros crept into our bedrooms, we could just be discreet. Eros could be kept in the shadows. But if you were gay or lesbian, as far as church and society were concerned, your sexuality was defined by eros, and moreover condemned as perverse and selfish. And if you were gay or lesbian and determined not only to stay in the church, but even to write theology, well then, because your theology was the very grounds for your condemnation, keeping eros in the shadows was not an option. You needed to make a vigorous defense of why eros was not some fatal flaw in your character, but an essential part of the created goodness you carried. If you were gay or lesbian, you needed to redeem eros in a way that no straight person had to. And these theologians, writing out of their own experience, including the profound goodness they knew within their sexuality, they redeemed eros and then some. For me and Margaret, that redemption of eros was life-giving. Tutored, as it were, by gay and lesbian theologians sitting, metaphorically of course, on our nightstand, we learned to savor our longing and our touching in ways that the discreet affirmation of our straight sexuality had never dreamed of. We were blessed. But also, my understanding of generosity was transformed. So now we're ready to talk about the heart of generosity, eros. You see, eros is love grounded in the blessing of finitude. Yes, within sexuality, eros guides that love that carries me beyond myself and gifts me with an exquisite completion that lies in another. But eros is so much more than that. Eros is the viscerally felt, the sensually known, satisfying connection between us and the world. From physical need to emotional hope to intellectual excitement and aesthetic aspiration, eros is the human being fully inhabiting its embodied humanity. Eros is in the thirst that longs for and relishes cool water. Eros is in the quiet glee of curling up with a good book. Eros is in the aroma of fresh-baked bread or that first brewed cup of coffee in the morning. It's in the symphony of birdsong at the break of dawn or the symphony of an orchestra. Eros is in the purr of a cat or the contented sigh of a dog when you rub it in just that special place. It's in the beauty of the sunset or the twinkling of stars on a dark night. Eros is even in the sweat and sore muscles after a long hike or a hard day of work. Eros is love grounded in the blessing of finitude. Eros is love drenched in the wonder of what is. It is the love, the joy, gratitude, awe that we know at the many places where our senses join us to the world around us. Eros is the bridge to the other, whether person, pet, or other planetary wonder, whose company we might savor in a multitude of ways. What a tragedy, then, that we have so narrowed eros down to sex, and yet further to the selfish side of sexuality that in truth contradicts the very meaning of eros itself. One almost wonders whether eros was so twisted and diminished in order to prevent us from accessing its power. I mentioned at the start that my relationship with agape has been checkered at best. There is no doubt expressions of self-giving love are a good thing. Every parent, friend, sibling, and lover knows that the relationships that we prize most require the occasional gift of selfless love to really nourish. I have known this too. But as the singular ideal, as the defining pattern of love, agape has serious flaws. Dislodged from its proper place as surprising grace within the life of eros, by itself, agape tempts us to believe that we are only optionally members of a community larger than ourself. In fact, I have come to suspect that agape love, at least when made the pinnacle of love, the measure by which other loves are found wanting, when that happens, agape is the mirror of patriarchal love. When cast as pure, perfect love, agape expects and needs nothing in return. It is always and only self-giving. It is a view of love that says it is both possible and even desirable to have no need of others. And this is a notion of love ideal for perpetuating patterns of domination. What agape offers in its spirit of generosity is always charity, never justice. And as my friend Colin says, charity requires disparity. It requires a situation in which some have extra while others are desperately in need. Agape is rooted in disparity. Eros, however, because it is rooted in honest human need, knows something about vulnerability from the inside. Hence, eros is the love that powers healthy, human, just generosity, that responds to needs without waiting for disparity to spur it into action. This is love that relishes the humble awareness that both need and gift are universal, and they move, circulate universally among us. In one moment, my need receives its completion from another person, creature, or element of the world, and in the very next, my gift completes the need of another person, creature, or element of the world. But wait, the mystery is that sometimes, fairly often, almost always if we attend to it, need and gift overlap in the miracle of mutuality. And mutuality born of eros is truly at the heart of generosity fit for finitude. Indeed, mutuality and practice of justice, because it is life erotically reflecting the truth of an interdependent reality. And mutuality is also the presence and practice of love, because in its rich diversity, this interdependent reality longs erotically to feel itself folded into embrace upon embrace upon embrace. And from this perspective, it becomes clear that finitude is not simply our lot in life as though it were bad fortune. It is our luck, our extraordinary good fortune to be given lives that lure us into other lives, human and non-human. Eros aims to restore authentic intimacy as the very ground of our relationships, from self to other to earth. And in a world beset by systems and structures of power whose survival and profit depend on our disconnection, this is yet more than good fortune. In such a world, to make mutuality the heartfelt measure of our humanity is in fact an act of holy resistance. For mutuality is the fullness of eros manifest in vibrant community. It is the seed of the forces deep within that call us to become more than we have been up to now. As the mundane yet sacred mode of our creaturely existence, mutuality is the way we bear witness to all that we must hold the world in our hands. In the face of adversity and oppression, mutuality becomes solidarity. On a finite planet, across diverse ecosystems, up and down food chains, from wilderness to urban settings, Mutuality is both the pursuit and the practice of harmony and humility, justice and joy, care and compassion. So at the heart of our generosity is not the abundance of what we have, for in the realm of finitude, what we ought to have is simply enough. And at the heart of our generosity is not the desperate need of others. That need is a cry for justice, to which we respond not with charity, but with solidarity. No, finally, at the heart of our generosity is eros, love that links us, indeed lures us, into mutuality with other lives, into that symphony where need and gift blend seamlessly as notes of the same song, in which this chorus rises again and again to declare with knowing delight, nothing belongs to any of us except as we belong to one another. Generosity is that chorus, sung out in the whole of our lives. May it be so.